has been a turbulent start to the Phillies season, with them underwhelming in a lot of categories. But with all the talk about the bullpen, about the lineup construction, about Rob Thomson's decision making, it all has boiled down to the bats not delivering as this team is designed. But there could be better signs on the horizon, as finally we are seeing signs of the hitters at the plate approach looking a little bit better for this Phillies team. I want to break down exactly what has gone down in recent games and why I think that this can propel them moving forward for the length of the season. I'm going to dive into exactly what this is on this episode of Phillies Digest here. And I'm going to start off diving in with this article from my guy Brad Wakai of Sports Illustrated. And he titles it, Philadelphia Phillies offensive explosion on Saturday could be a sign of things to come. The offensive explosion that took place during Saturday's game could be a precursor of what's to come for the rest of the Philadelphia Phillies season. And that is a point that I do want to make clear here. When speaking about this Phillies team, we've talked about it from a lot of different angles. We've talked about our biggest concerns, but I think the foundation of where this team has fallen short in recent games, and really the entirety of the season, it has been at the plate. That this Phillies team at its core, and I understand we've strayed to this from an extent, but is built to mash. That these are guys who should be high-level home run hitters, and that is not how things have played out thus far. To lay the exact stats on the table, and apologize for the small font here, but you can see them highlighted down at the bottom. The Philadelphia Phillies are 27th in the league in home runs. That does not fly for a team that is designed the way this Phillies team is designed. Now, to get back to the article and lay out a little bit of the argument of why things should be changing, do want to start off with this portion here. It writes, the Phillies came into the year with the understanding that things had to change on offense. 2 straight postseason appearances had ended in the same manner, striking out by chasing pitches and not being able to produce the timely hit. Because of that, everyone got on the same page over the winter about how everyone's approach at the plate has to change, opting to become more selective while focusing on making contact with the ball just to put it in play. The results have been mixed. Philadelphia has the 3rd highest on-base percentage, 340, are tied for first in walk rate at 11.2%, which I love that number there. Bottom half in strikeout rate, and have the 3rd lowest chase rate of any team in Major League Baseball. Now, to address this head on, I do think this has to be looked at as signs of progress. When looking at the list of hitters that we have, Nick Castellanos being the most pressing that pops to mind here, there are guys that, are up there to hack, that they want to take their digs at it, take their chances, and they're there to mash baseballs there. And sometimes we see the downside of this. Castellanos, to his credit, I've been more impressed with his plate approach than I have in any other season of him in a Phillies uniform, but we still see the weaknesses and it come out in bad times. But this has been something that I do think applies to the entirety of the roster. Bryson Stott, staring down first pitches at a historic rate, that he's not going to swing at that first one here. And I understand, you can make the case that sometimes you want to in all these kind of conversations, but I do think that sets the tone for this Phillies team. I do think that is intentional why Rob Thomson has him at the top of the order, and for Bryson himself leading the charge with that. Now, to continue on with this article for the downside of things here, it writes, those are the things that fans have been clamoring for out of this group. However, the other side of that coin has resulted in them scoring just the 12th most runs while sitting 23rd in homers and 23, and again, passed since this article has been written. Something needs to give. The Phillies can keep getting on base at a high rate and taking good at-bats, but when they have runners on the base and in scoring position, they have to come through. That happened on Saturday. Philadelphia won 10-4 and put up their 2nd most runs in a single game so far this season. And considering the weather factor that was in play, this was their best showing of the campaign. And it does feel like that little blooper that did fall, I believe Max Kepler hit it, that felt like it was just a straight-up fly ball here, fell behind the third base right on the chalk there, and ultimately kind of led to the floodgates opening here. Feels like that could be a turning point for this Phillies season. And it felt like they've needed one of these offensive explosions, and I do hope this carries over moving forward. Now, to lay out a little bit more of their rankings from an offensive perspective here, shout out to Francisco at Rojas_media, a good follow on Twitter, does some nice Philly stuff here, and he tweets out, in runs scored, they rank 14th. In batting average, 11th. On-base percentage, 3rd. OPS, 13th, and home runs in 27th. So while I do appreciate this Phillies team making some sacrifices in their approach, changing up their outlook at the plate here, they still have to be the team that strikes fear into pitchers on the mound, that they can take you yard in any given pitch here. When you have Kyle Schwarber, when you have Bryce Harper, when you have Nick Castellanos, these type of guys, that has to be the outlook here. Now, to touch on a couple of these guys here, I do want to dive into their stats in particular. For Bryce Harper specifically this season, it certainly has not been the stellar MVP caliber start to the year. In fact, I think you could make the case that he has already gone through a little bit of a lull in his season, but nonetheless, the production does not lie for a guy who's one of the league's best baseball players. 5 home runs and 16 RBIs, a 370 on base percentage, 104 at bats. He has logged 24 hits, 25 strikeouts there. It has not been the stellar start to Bryce Harper. And I will say, I think what we see with Bryce more so than anything, we've seen moments where he's been pressing. And I mean less about that at the plate for him and more about, that little single that he hits that he tries to stretch to and double or, taking an extra base when he just straight up shouldn't. That feels like it's happened at a more frequent rate than we're even typically accustomed to, which is a fair bit throughout the entirety of Bryce Harper here. Now, the guy that I do want to point to, and unfortunately need to continue shedding some light on, it is Trea Turner here. And the unfortunate reality that I think we all need to become aware of and acknowledge here, he may never be the guy that they signed him to be. That Trea Turner very well could end up being the Tobias Harris of this Phillies team. With that said here, that does not mean he cannot be serviceable. Now, personally, what bothers me the most about Trea, it's the fielding. It drives me insane when I see a ball go through his legs or a relatively, typical play that he should be making. Your run-of-the-mill ground out to shortstop that he just sort of struggles with. Now, on the other side of the coin, he will once in a while pull one out of his hat that I thought he had no chance of getting there. He's not like, he's pretty close. I was about to say he's not a god-awful defender, but he's pretty close to that. I'm pretty frustrated by that being the stance with all the monetary stipulations, and it would be one thing if this was like Kyle Schwarber when he was playing left field, where you saw the shortcomings of what he brought in the field, but if he's leading the league in home runs, as he did in a season here in Philadelphia, you can overlook that. That just hasn't been Trea Turner. And to lay out the stats for what we've seen so far this year, just 1 home run, just 10 RBIs, a 345 on base percentage, has walked 11 times, 27 hits in his 103 at bats, and 23 strikeouts there. He has still been better than the first version of Trea Turner that showed up to Philadelphia, but my belief in him ever bouncing back to the player that we expected him to be, to sort of be in that MVP mix as he once was when playing for the Dodgers here, to be a guy that is viewed as one of the premier players in the entire sport of baseball, I just don't really see it in there, and I do think that's going to become a more and more notable deal moving forward. Now, for the short term, they don't have a choice. They got to roll with it. They got to just hope he improves and finds himself to a little bit higher level than has been the case thus far. And there have been stretches where he's looked unbelievable, that he will go on a hot streak, will go on a tear, where all of a sudden the home run threat is back. He's using all parts of the field. And another point that I do want to acknowledge with Trea, when I speak about my frustration with the fielding, what drives me crazy with him specifically is it does feel like it compounds. That particularly in that first season in Philadelphia where things were really going downhill, that you saw him carrying his frustrations at the plate out to the field and vice versa. When things were going wrong in one area, they were going wrong in all areas. That kind of stuff cannot happen and is pretty inexcusable in my book. I do understand this is an easier said than done type of thing, but I do think with Trea specifically, you see it. When he doesn't have it, he doesn't have it. Now, a player that there is a little bit more freedom when speaking about movement or his future outlook, we know that we're locked in on the Trea Turner business, and we got to kind of make the most of it at this current point. A guy that is not the case for, that is Alec Bohm here. It has been an interesting start to the season for Alec Bohm. That, of course, he's had a pretty impressive hitting streak. That he's got 8 RBIs, just a 252 on base percentage, which straight up is not good enough there. 109 at bats, that he's had 24 hits, 19 strikeouts there. We're starting to see, by the way, a slugging percentage of 275, and I do want to make that point clear. I get you have to stack the deck in this lineup that you're having contact hitters and you're having power hitters. For Alec Bohm specifically, it drives me insane that there's not an ounce of power in his 6'5" body. For a guy who is as big and honestly kind of physically impressive when looking at him standing at the plate, there is no threat of him driving anything beyond a gapper. That, yes, maybe he'll once in a while bloop one over the fence, and he will hit a couple home runs this year. He's not going to end up with 0, but there is never going to be this threat of him being a power hitter. And I think we got to kind of acknowledge that is who Alec Bohm is. And even while he has bounced back from the version of himself that was playing incredibly poor baseball there, I still think we got to acknowledge that he's sort of a flawed baseball player as a whole. I don't have a pathway to finding a better third baseman. I still think that is hoping for the continued development of the minor leagues and living with the Alec Bohm experience at this current time. But I do think that could be something that is really concerning on this Phillies team. Now, granted, if you get enough production from the names around him, all of a sudden we're not talking about Alec Bohm. And there is value in a guy who is a very high-level contact hitter, that he can drive it in the gaps. He will put bat on ball. He will be a guy that if all the stars align correctly, could be among the league leaders in RBIs as he was for the entirety of the first half of last year. But that has not fully put together to this point here, and I do need that to occur moving forward. So it is still very early in this Phillies season, less than 20% through the MLB season, not even 1/5 of the way to the finish line there. But it does feel like we may have hit a bit of a turning point. If the bats can continue waking up from here, I do think there's something that can spiral with this Phillies team. That momentum is a real thing, particularly with this group that seems so tied to the vibes and everything else that they like to talk. They get that JBL speaker going in the locker room. Throw on a little Dancing on My Own, even though I know that brings some hard feelings here. Maybe we got to find a new song. I'm open to that. No worries. And by the way, Garrett Stubbs chilling in the minors. Who knows what he's doing down there? Shout out to Stubbs. Hope he as well. But the point being here, that it is time for this lineup to take over, and I do hope that 10-4 victory over the Cubs is the first sign of it. I'm recording this before they start the series with the Nationals, so Game 1 will be played by the time this video is live. Do hope that I'm not jinxing things by any means, and hopefully I'm even more excited about the offensive output. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Appreciate each and every one of you guys too for tuning into this video here. As always, it is a long season ahead for this Phillies team, and hopefully they're just now finding their stride. Regardless, I'm going to be on top of things from start to finish right here on Phillies Digest and want as many of you along for the ride as possible. So make sure you're hitting that subscribe button if you have not already. Drop a like on this video here. Drop your comments below. I'll be back talking to you next time. Peace.